So there we go. I've backstitched at the beginning and at the end here. If you've got a lock stitch on your machine, that works just as effectively and efficiently. It's probably quicker, actually. No envy in my voice at all. Right, now I get my lining and I lay it over. I've left the excuse me, I've left the pin which I put in at this end to mark that centimetre at the bottom. I've left that in because I need to know when I'm stitching to pull the zip tape out of the way, and I find it easier to just leave that pin in there so that I slow down on my stitching here, make sure that zip tape is tucked under, and then I can keep stitching round to the end. So there we go, stitched on. I'll just get these corners off. And yes, in answer to your question, even if that means clipping a little bit of the zipper tape. Right, let's turn that out. Okay, so that's pinned that down. I'll go and do the top stitching, and then my zip gusset will be done. And there we go, I've top stitched. I changed my thread, so I've done my top stitching on the zip gusset. I've put a couple of stitches in at the end here just to stop the zip pull wandering off if I open it for any reason. And I'll trim that interfacing off, and then my zip pull is done. Using is canvas, so it's a bit cotton canvas, so it's a bit generous with its thread. Strap anchors, folding them in half, then back, bring up a quarter of it, fold that over. Okay, just giving that a nice firm press. Okay, I'm going to fold both of them, so I'm just going to pin that now. So again, I get it on the long edge, fold it up in half, finger press, because when you open it up you can still see that fold line. Go up to there. I'll just pin that on, come back to the halfway line here, just matching my edges there so there's no overlap. Now what I'm going to do is go to the machine and I'm just going to stitch the seam down the edges there. Okay, now as I mentioned, this is quite a generous canvas with its threads, So I'm just going to use the serrated scissors to the pinking shears just to trim that edge off to keep it neat for me. Okay, then here are my rectangular rings. Put my strap anchor through, match that up. And then just to keep it on, what I'll do is just a 1/2 centimetre seam on the bottom of that. It's just a basting stitch to keep it all together before I set it on one side. Okay, so now what we're going to do is move to the flap. I've got my outer and my lining piece on the flap. Let's just move them out the way. Magnetic snap, I've got the 2 back plates, and I've got, wrong fingernail, sorry, there we go. There's the female part which will go on the base of the bag, and the male part which I'm going to insert on the flap. So I'll just move the base out of the way. So I get my flap lining, and I'm going to fold it in half, matching the raw edges of the fabric, not the interfacing. I need to trim it, sorry. And it's going to go on, let me just line that up. So this is the bottom curved edge. It's going to go onto that 1 inch up. So that would be there. I'll just check that. Okay. So this is how I put them on. I make that X on the line. The vertical is to keep me on that halfway point. I mark my put the male part on the front. Oh, I haven't got my my bits of interfacing. 2 seconds. Okay, so I've got 2 pieces of interfacing. Nothing special about the size. This is just what I do. And then I push them over the feet. I get my back plate. And yes, I'm part of the spread it out, not clip it over. Okay, some people will bring these pins in and put them over each other on this disc plate. I don't do that, as you can see. It's a personal choice thing. I haven't heard of arguments that specifically state that it's better one way or the other. Then I get my second piece of interfacing, and I'm going to put that on when I press the flap after I've stitched it. Now I get my outer, right side up, get my flap, match the raw edges of the fabric, and we start pinning. Now this is going to get about 1 centimetre seam the whole way round. I am going to have to buy some new pins. These ones are just being a bit of a pain when it comes to fitting in. Okay, so let me just check that reverse is okay. Yep. Right, I'll just go and stitch that. In this section, I'm going to snip so that when I turn it inside out, this curved corner is going to just lay a little bit flatter. Then I turn it out. Oh, my chopstick's not in here. Need to work out where that's gone. Okay. Right. Now I'm going to stitch the whole way round. So there's the flap with about a 7mm or 1/16 of an inch seam there. I might go back on and do another one just for some strength. Don't forget, my my outer is different to my lining, so at the moment I have 2 different threads from the same manufacturer so that I don't have a visible thread here on the flap. So with that second row, just to say, I don't actually go along and do that top stitching or that top row of stitching twice. I just do the edge of the flap because it's about making that edge a little bit thicker and a little bit stronger. So, flap done. Let's put these right sides together. It's going to be easier to see it this way, I think. Light onto dark. What I do first is I just want to top stitch along here so I can flip it over and start making that seam. So I've stitched it there with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. I'm going to fold it over. And this particular situation, I'm helped by one side being a canvas. It's going to just be a little bit easier to fold so that I can top stitch it. Okay. One of the things that's great about this pattern is it's pretty adaptable. If you've chosen to put your zippered pocket on the inside, get the lining piece that does not have the zippered pocket on it. Otherwise, just get a lining piece. Lay this on so that that bottom edge fits. Let's make sure this is level. chuck a couple of pins in just to keep it where I want it. Now again, I can choose to divide this pocket in half. I can third it. I can do a quarter and leave a large pocket. So you could fit a device into that and have, I don't know, a Nintendo Switch or something in this pocket if that's your bag. Okay, so I think I'm probably going to third this one. Okay, so let me just measure that, and then I will stitch those dividing lines on as part of tacking this on. So I'm going for 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters to give me my 3 pockets. This is an air erasable pen, so I'm pretty comfortable drawing on my fabric. Right. So now what I'll do is stitch these pockets, and I'll just do a bigger stitch across the bottom here just to keep it all flat and tidy. And there we go, there's my 3 pockets stitched. And so that's my internal slip pocket attached to the lining. To make a zippered pocket here, I've got my outer piece. I fold it in half, matching the edges on the top, at the sides and the bottom. And I just give it a fold. Doesn't need to be the whole way down. I just need to give it a fold on that top. Now what I do is I always line that fold up with a mark on my cutting board so that I can find it. Now my zippered pocket needs to be 3¼ inches or 8 centimeters down from this center line. So, sorry, 3¼ is right there. Now I get my pocket. I'm just going to fold that in half. Again, not the whole way down. I don't need it done the whole way down. And there's my mark. I just line that pocket up there. Now I don't put a gazillion pins in because they get in the way or they stab me and then I have to start again because I've donated blood all over my fabric. So just a couple of pins to keep it where I want it. 3 centimeters down this center fold, or 1¼ inches. As my ruler is in inches, it will be there. Now what I've got is I happen to have a ruler that has the markings for the zipper. I've got a 3/8 inch or a dress zip, a number 3 zip, and I've got a 1/2 inch, which is a number 5 zip. If this tool looks handy, then there's a link in the comments below. So I've made the zipper the same size as the pocket because I wanted to stitch over that gap here. So, but my hole is going to be 1 inch smaller than the fabric, 1/2 inch gap on either side. These pins are handy, but in the wrong place for my ruler, so I'm just going to move them. So what I do with my ruler is I get that on the line there, still in the way, and I want to measure a 6-inch zip. If you refer to page 15 of the pattern, you can see I ask you to make a pocket that looks like this. I ask you to mark it out. What I'll do now is I'll just draw a line in the middle because that's where I'm going to put my scissors in first. Okay. So this box is what you need to draw. Sorry. I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch round this rectangular box. Get my unpicker, push it through, and I'm going to try and come along this line. No, I can't. The canvas is too thick. So I will just go up to that triangle on both sides. Very carefully. I'm just going to come short of that on both sides. Let's go to the other end. Okay. So now that hole is open. You can see from this side as well. Okay. Unpin. Now push everything in through the opening. Take your time. This is such a visible thing. See, there's always one side that sits better than the other. If I can't get this to sit nicely, what I am going to do is go in here and just trim that little triangle off. It helps it sit better sometimes. Let's have a quick look. Excuse me. Oh yeah, that's looking all right. It's flat on this side here. Now, yeah, I'm happy with that. Now I get my zip. I'm just going to check that it opens. Yeah, okay. And I'm going to lay it on here. This is where having a zip slightly wider than your pocket can always be beneficial, because it means that you've got zip to use to tie it on with. And argue with. Right. Now I'm going to turn it over and just make sure that that is sitting in the middle. And I can close it. Not quite the middle there. No, that's okay. Better. Okay, now I'm going to stitch around this with a very, very small seam so that I catch the zip the whole way around. So there we go. There's my zip stitched around the outside, the bottom of the pocket, and lay it over. Which means when I stitch here, I'm actually going to get, again, an extra little bit of grab for the zipper. When I pin this, I'm pinning it from this side because I'm going to go round. I'm going to try and keep these two bits on the zip together. Okay, and then make sure this is laying flat as well. So I'll start here, come up, come along, donating blood again, and then go down there. Okay, so there it is, stitched on. And yes, in answer to your question, when I go over the zipper teeth, I do a couple of little back stitches. I'm going to get my pinking shears and just go around this pocket, just as an extra level of not letting things shred, because this is my outer pocket and I don't really want it to be fraying. So you can see there's some back stitching. Sorry. You can see there's the back stitching on that other end. And now my pocket is complete. So now we're going to do my front pocket. Now for this one, I'm not going to do the piping because I don't think it needs it on this particular bag. I'll do piping separately as a supplementary video to this one. So I'm going to be aiming, because I've got big hands, I'm going to be aiming to leave about a 4-inch or a 10cm gap here so that I can turn the pocket out when I finish stitching it. Using a 1cm seam, I'm going to go around and stitch this on. Okay, so here's my opening at the bottom, and I've stitched round. I'll just clip the corners off. Again, miss the stitching again. Right. Again, I'm going to just snip this curve, not as much as I did the flap, because the flap will move more than this. I just am doing this to help it lie better on the bag. Okay, we've got to attach the other half of the magnetic snap, and it's going to go on this pocket. So I've got my outside of the pocket on the top, folding it in half. Two and a half centimeters, 1 inch. So as I did before, X marks the spot in my best pirate parlance. There we go. Then my female part ideally lines up straight away. There it is. And there it is. Okay. Lay it flat. Put the disc on. Put this on just to protect the fabric. I'll turn my pocket the right way around. Now, I'll turn my pocket the right way around. Now, because that gap is so close here, I'm going to top stitch using a zipper foot to make sure that I get into that space and come along. So I'll just change my sewing machine foot and I'll do that top stitch. Okay, so I've top stitched my my pocket. Now I need to fit my pocket to the outer. Now this is the one that does not have the zippered pocket on it. So what I need to do is I need to center this on this. I'm only squeezing on the bottom because I'm only going to be lining up at the bottom. I line that fold up. I lay this on. Now this gap at the bottom needs to be 2 centimeters or 1/8. I'm going to pin on the seams because I'm going to stitch on there. So let's just check again. That side's too low down. Yeah. One of the reasons I don't pin, they always move. Right. I haven't changed my thread because I like that look. I'm going to come round with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Now I'd like to divide this pocket. It's a full width at the moment. You can divide this however you like. If you want to do it into the third, so at 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters, you can do that. But I just want to divide it in half. So what I will do, because the magnetic snap is in the middle, I actually come up and get as close to that as I can physically get with the needle, with the sewing machine. And then if I'm feeling brave, because my hand sewing is terrible, I take the stitching up to the bottom of the magnetic snap. So there we go. I've got 2 pockets. Just fold it in half. And try and get that. So here I'm going to do those itty bitty little clips that I talked about, just so that I can get it to sit around that corner better. Now, personally speaking, I find that pins don't work that well on corners, so I always clip. To see the itty bitty little snips, and then I'll come round, and so I've pinned the whole way around. I did clip on those corners just so that it would sit nicely. Now I'm going to stitch the whole way around so that I can fit my so that I can fit my gusset to the bag. Okay, so that's stitched now, but what I'm going to do is just go back over those ones that I did and just snip the fabric again. And now I'm catching the outer fabric and the gusset fabric, just to get it to lie a bit better. You can see these are about 1 centimeter big, these snips are making now. I know it's obvious, but I'm going to say it again. Don't cut the stitching. Okay, so I'm going to have a quick sneaky peek. Yeah, baby. Oh, I like that colour combination. Right, sorry, moment there. Now I get my other outer piece, which is the one with that I put the zip in earlier, and I'm going to repeat the process. I've pinned it all on. It's pinned here on the gusset side so that when I stitch it, I can have the piece I'm stitching actually down on the bed of the sewing machine. So that's got the other outer stitched on. I've snipped the curves again. I'm going to turn it right side out and get my flap. So I'm going to get my flap, just match the edges. And then get this. This. then what I can do is match that V with that V. Now it's really important to pin this, because what you need to do is check that the magnetic snaps line up before you stitch the flap in position. So that came down and that's sitting nicely. What I'm also going to do whilst I'm here, get my strap anchors. And I'm going to, actually I like that little pink flower more, so I'm going to put the pink flower on that way. Now I can go and stitch the flap and the strap anchors on. Okay, so that's my outer virtually done. I need to add the shoulder strap and the lining, but that is virtually done. So now what we're going to do is get the lining. So my lining gusset is pinned on, and I'll go around now with a 1 centimetre seam allowance and I will stitch it on. So that's my second lining piece pinned on. I did with the outer, I'm going to have the piece of lining I'm stitching flat on my machine and the piece I've already stitched up in the air. Okay, so I've clipped the corners on the lining as well. I need to install the zipper gusset. So fold it in half and snip a V, teeny tiny V. Try and get it in the seam above the stitching. And do it on both sides. See, even that has made one. Now the V that I had earlier, I'm going to open this up. There's the V I did earlier when I was putting the flap on. I match that. Sorry, let me just get some pins. They're all on the sewing machine. Okay, now I know that interfacing is standing proud, so I'm just going to check. Yeah, okay. And then with the other side I do the same thing. So my gusset is pinned in position. What I want to do is just close it so I can make sure that the tail isn't twisted like it is there. because it needs to go on that way round. Yeah. And this is where actually it does need to be pins doing this, because clips are going to come off when you check. So close the zip. Yes, that's working how I want it to, because there's the front of the bag. There's my zip gusset, my flap. That's going to go over like that. So yes, that's working how I want, but to stitch it on, I need to have the zip completely open and those gusset pieces right sides onto the bag. Okay, I'm just going to go and baste these into position with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Okay, so the bag's upside down. I've put my zip gusset on. It's not upside down for any reason other than I can't show it to you. Okay, so now I've got my outer all ready, and I'm making space to do the next bit, which is to get the outer right sides together inside the lining. Now, just one thing, I want this pocket on the back of the bag, so my pocket is on the surface, and I'm putting the bag in with the front at the top. What that should mean when we come out the other end is that I will have the internal pocket on the back of the bag. Personally, I always line up here on the side seams first. Now, if I can, I'll get pins in, because they just move less than the quilting clips. There we go. Okay. And now I can go around and just attach the lining to the outer. Okay, there we go. Last couple of pins here. There we go. Okay. And now I can go around and just attach the lining to the outer. Okay, there we go. Last couple of pins here. I'm actually going in this gap. I'm not actually pinning the zip gusset. I'm pinning the flap and the outer to the lining because it's thinner. The pin can get in there without trying to burrow a hole in the fabric, and it still holds everything in position. So there we go, all pinned together. Now I'm going to go round and I'm going to take the bag, and I will berth the bag through the hole I left in the lining. Okay, so I've stitched the outer and the lining together, and now I'm going to pull the outer through that gap that I left in the seam of the lining. This is sometimes a struggle and sometimes straightforward. Take your time with it. You don't want to rip anything. And you just need to feel what moves and what doesn't. Oops. There we go. There's the lining coming out. Okay. Oops. There we go. There's the lining coming out. Okay, I always put it back in, put the lining back inside, just to make sure that everything fits and is sitting nicely. Let's do that zip up. Lots of bits. I'll clean it up at the end. Okay, so that's sitting well. That's closing. Let's get those strap anchors out. Okay, that's starting to come together. So what we've got to do now is go round and pinch this. But before I do that, I'm going to stitch that gap on the lining. So I've pulled my lining out. There's my gap in the seam. Just make sure that sits nicely. You might have some threads hanging around it and sitting off it. Just tighten them. Don't cut them until after you've stitched. The smallest seam allowance I can do, about 1/2 centimetre, which is what, about 1/16 of an inch, maybe even less, along here, and then I can move to the top. Okay, so that's our internal seam allowance done. Tuck the tail in out of the way. Make it sit nicely. I tend to start in the corner here. And just go around clipping. Now I can't clip the flap, obviously. So that part is done by hand. The sewing, the needle comes around here. I'll turn it. The needle comes round that corner, and I keep this as flat as I can, this as flat as I can, having made sure that that lining is sitting nicely down and pulled super tight, so that then that will fit nicely. Okay, so I'm about to start stitching here. You can see I've opened the zip up so that I've got good access on the sewing machine bed. I will start on around the seam on the end, because I find that the stitches are generally hidden there, particularly when you do that extra couple of steps with a back stitch. And just go around nice and slowly. So you could hear that the machine started reacting to the fact that it got a bit thicker. So I've just slowed down, but I've got a nice long stitch on here at the moment. This is a 4.5 for my machine. Just making sure that that lining's nice and flat. Okay. Now I'm going to keep the zip open whilst I go around here. I moved it. But I'll close the zip before I get onto the other zip flap, onto the other part of the gusset. But you can see I'm just trying to get everything nice and flat. There we go. That's a bit better, isn't it? Okay, now I've got maybe one stitch into the flap. So let's just make some space. Now I will close the zipper because I want that nice flat position as I come down here. There we go. Now just take it slowly, because particularly on this seam at the back you've got 6-8 layers, so just nice and slow, no rush. Now I'm going to open the zip up again because I'm going to turn it round for this last little bit, and I just want that laying nice and open because it helps me keep everything straight. Given that I am poorly equipped with just 2 arms, I've got to get my support and help where I can. And there we go. Now I'm going to open the zip up again because I'm going to turn it round for this last little bit, and I just want that laying nice and open because it helps me keep everything straight. Given that I am poorly equipped with just 2 arms, I've got to get my support and help where I can. And there we go. Now I'm going to open the zip up again because I'm going to turn it round for this last little bit, And I just want that laying nice and open because it helps me keep everything straight. Given that I am poorly equipped with just 2 arms, I've got to get my support and help where I can. Let's go back to the table. So here's my zipper tab, 4 by 3 inches, so 10 centimeters by 7, I think that is. So I'm just going to make a small fold over on the short edges so that I can seam that. So I've stitched that seam just like we did for the strap anchors. Fold it in half. And bring it to the middle like that. Okay, so my stitched ends are now at the top and the bottom. I get my zip. And I put it in about halfway. Now one option is to, depending on the state of your zip, is you could actually wrap that round it. And then this comes over the top like that. The other option is that you just leave the zip in the middle. And because the fabric's a little bit wider, it's covered and protected. I always fiddle because of these little tails, little sticky pokey outy bits that annoy me. And I also check the bottom. There we go. So now I'm going to do a boxed X, which means I'm going to stitch a square the whole way round, and then I will do a diagonal and a diagonal, and that secures not only the fabric but the zip inside. So there you go, there is my box with the X on the inside. Now we're going to put the shoulder strap on. Alright, so now we've just got the bag strap left to put on. I've just got some webbing here and my adjustable buckle. I start with the adjustable buckle. There's a right side and a wrong side for that buckle, so that's what I'm just checking. Feed one end of the webbing through, fold over a couple of centimeters, barely an inch, like that. Oops, sorry, I was going to get a pin when I was looking for one of those. Now I'm going to turn the bag, keeping that buckle with that seam side down. I come to the strap on the side and I feed it through, keeping that seam on the surface, making sure that my webbing strap is straight. Sorry that that's off camera. I pull it through, feed it back in the other side, and then still keeping that straight, I go round and I put it through here, still folding over only an inch, 2.5 centimeters, no more than that. And then I'll do the box with the X through it on that seam there and on the seam here. One quick tip is to adjust your strap now before you stitch anything. That will tell you if everything's sitting flat and nice.